Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book-loving, notebook-hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of bookology and leading literate lives. We talk all things books and reading and notebooks and writing, mixed in with mindful practices and creativity to create lives we love. You can expect regular weekly episodes focused on 3 books you need to know about on a bookish theme and how to bring those themes to life in our actual lives too. You can also expect author interviews, notebooking inspiration, and topics to help us grow through what we go through and take inspired action to make our lives better. So grab a notebook and your TBR list and let's get literate. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Get Literate podcast. I'm here today with a quick introduction to today's special guest. When I first started this podcast, it was my intention to talk about books and especially create themed collection of books that could help us grow through what we go through, could help us bring a certain emotion or feeling to our reading life, and then give us lessons to bring into our actual life. But I also shared my love of notebooking and journaling and my obsession with piles and piles of notebooks all over the place. And it turns out that those are the most popular episodes of the podcast, those that talk about writing. That's why I know you are going to love the special guest that I have for you today. Not only is she an author of books that we'd love to read, but she has shared pretty much everything she knows about writing and the writing process with us in her newest book so that we can strengthen our own writing lives too, and maybe write that book that I know so many of us have always dreamed about. So Emily Stark, or no, I just messed
That's
up.
fair. That's fair.
Just interviewed someone with the last name Stark. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me start from that point. So, Emily Winslow, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to talk with you today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I've written a series of crime novels set in Cambridge, England, which is where I live, although I know everyone can hear from my voice that I'm an American. I'm from New Jersey. I've lived here almost 18 years now. It's just beautiful. And then besides the novels, I've written a memoir. And now I have this book about writing based on my experiences teaching creative writing and my experiences writing myself and dealing with publishers and just every aspect of the process. And I love that your audience, from the way you describe them, seem to be very interested in not just telling fictional stories, although fictional stories are great, but also exploring their own stories. And as somebody who has done both, I've had novels and a memoir. I just want to say that anything story-like this writing book applies to. So whether you're working on fiction or a memoir, the principles of good storytelling are going to help you.
Yeah. There was so much in your book. I think even, me, someone who, I felt like you were speaking to right on that first page, thinking about the idea of a book, but also I think being a reader and reading this book gave me such a great perspective on the writing process and why I like certain books and how I like certain books. And I do think that it just supported my ideas of notebooking and journaling in general. Like if you lean into the printed word, then this is a book where you're going to find your place. I joked when we first came on that I can't even count how many sticky notes are now all over this book because of things that just jumped out at me, or the lessons that I wanted to learn as a writer, the things that I realized I love as a reader that I now have a name for, which I didn't before. It was a really great connection between, I think, my reading life and my writing life. So what made you decide to switch gears from writing novels and a memoir to Time to Write, which we haven't even mentioned the title right. The title of that book is Time to Write, Inspiring Lessons and Practical Skills for Writing the Novel You've Always Wanted. Such a good subtitle.
Thank you. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I started teaching. And the reason I started teaching is because up until that point, my entire social life revolved around the parents of my kids' friends as I was taking my children to activities. And I saw rapidly approaching the time when that would not be the case. And that my kids would be doing their own things and I would not be taking them places. And as I had already written a couple of books by then, and writing, as you know, is quite solitary when you're in the actual writing stage. And I thought, wow, I need a reason to A, leave the house, and B, interact with other humans. This is important. So I started teaching, and it was fantastic. And the students who came into my life were just so full of creativity and talent and passion and excitement. And it was such a joy getting to know them, helping their words, come out, helping them make progress in the ways that they wanted to. And also for me, it was so fascinating trying to analyze, well, how does this work anyway? How can I communicate this to someone else? And just, when I had reached a critical mass of lectures I had prepared, I've taught on the certificate program where I did the How to Write a Novel term, and I've taught on the diploma program with the crime writing term, and then I've been teaching on the master's program for crime and thriller writing. And just as I accumulated all these lectures about all these different aspects of writing, just as a writer, I just thought, well, it's a book. That's what anything I think it goes in a book. That's just natural.
Yeah. Yeah. So you take a different approach though, which I loved. I think my favorite page, if I could only pick one, would be the very first page, because I think it's not only a lesson for a writing life, it's just a good life lesson in general. But, a lot of people, when they think about writing a book, it's about, well, obviously it's about the writing, but it's how many words and I guess the more stressful or nerve-wracking side of bringing a project like that to life. And you right away on the first page say, I have a very different suggestion for you, which is rest and daydream. Rest and daydream. Say more about that philosophy, because that, you had me at page 1 with those words right there.
I spent so many years feeling guilty for resting.
Yes.
And feeling guilty for daydreaming. And also there's another aspect of that besides rest and daydreaming, which is I've gradually observed over the years that if, say when my kids were little and my husband would have them and I would maybe have 4 hours to write in, and you would think I would write for 4 solid hours. But I would spend the first 2 hours, watching YouTube or reading blogs and feeling guilty about it. But there was something in me that needed to do that. And what I have gradually learned over the years is the incredible value in all of those things and just how necessary they are to the creative process. And it's not just necessary, like in the way that like sleep is necessary for wakefulness, although that is a big part of it. But daydreaming is literally part of the work. It's literally where the story is being born. It's like you don't feel guilty for carrying a baby for 9 months and say, God, I must be lazy. No, that's part of the work. And the daydreaming is how you're gestating the project. And if all you do in a day is you got in an hour of daydreaming or a half hour of daydreaming about your story and about your book, you get to check that off on your to-do list. I daydreamed today. So I just think, if you continue with the feeling guilty about it, you don't fully get out of it what you could. because you're not recognizing it as work. But if you recognize that it's work and you start to realize, I got the answer to this question, or I got the idea for this scene, and then it's just all part of this this push forward.
Yeah. It's just such a beautiful philosophy. It really is. It takes the stress away. It takes the angst. Like you said, so many of us feel so guilty for resting or for
Yes.
not being at the very highest productivity level that we can. But in something like this, which a lot of people in my community, they have a book inside them. I know they do. We talk about it often. That daydreaming is necessary, right? It's not procrastinating, although I guess until it is, but in reality, it is daydreaming.
So I do get later in the chapter, I do admit.
Yes, you do.
Discipline is also necessary. And I do sometimes, find when students get really excited about what I say about daydreaming, and then I say, like, but you do have to be disciplined too. It's not a free pass. But
Yes.
the reason I don't talk about discipline much is because our culture is like steeped in it. I honestly believe that everybody picking up that book has been beating themselves up about discipline for years.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying it's not important, it is, but I think you already know that. And so I don't need to say it. You're carrying that with you. And I just want to also add a little bit about what I was saying about how I would like watch TV for 2 hours before I could write. I discovered I needed this transition like into my writing mind. And it's just such a joy now to be able to do it without guilt, to factor it in. If I have a day to write, then I'm just chill for the morning. And I used to think it was laziness and self-indulgence. It's just working with my brain the way that my brain works. And now I can enjoy it and gradually ease in, and it's all fine.
Do you find that when you allow yourself to do that without the guilt or the stress or the shame, that you actually are more productive when you get to that writing piece because you're in a better space?
I'm certainly more happy with my productivity.
I understand exactly. So how did you decide what to put in this book? So if I'll give listeners a little overview of the table of contents, right? We've got some pieces on getting started. And what I love is that these chapters are these mini bite-sized chapters that are so easy to read and think about and digest. And so we've got a section for getting started. We have writing skills. And then I think my favorite was storytelling skills, because that's when I could really see what I was loving as a reader. Technical skills, facing the middle, being understood by others. And then I love how you wrapped it up with the professional life and your future. How did you decide, if all these years of writing, all this experience teaching, knowing what questions people come to you with, how did you decide on the structure of the book and to include what you decided to include?
So in a way, this is kind of a greatest hits of everything I've ever taught. So partly, this actually started being structured not first as a book, but first just as I was given the opportunity to write my own syllabuses, which, it's, you don't think it's this straightforward, but it is. When I was first hired, they're like, we're giving you the how to write a novel term of this course. You have 10 nights that you'll be teaching. What do you want to teach? Please let us know and we'll publish it in the brochure. And I'm like, right. Oh, okay. So I've already started like thinking about these things. And it was the same with the crime writing term. And then with the masters, that was really interesting because I was working with so many other wonderful, wonderful crime writers. And we were all just choosing our favorite things. And just as I was getting to know the students, I was thinking, oh, what do I want to tell them? What am I desperate for them to know? What do I see them needing when we're having conversations, over lunch or dinner, because these are residential semi-residential courses for periods of time. So, I really get a sense for what they need. And so the lectures I created were all just in response to what do I think these wonderful, creative, interesting people most need to know. And then once I had all that content, I pulled out what were the things that I had been able to tell over years had the strongest effect, were the most surprising to students, had the best improvement in their work and in their understanding. And so that, I couldn't have written this 7 years ago, even though I was an experienced writer 7 years ago, and I knew I knew enough to start teaching. But this book is not just full of what I've learned as a writer, but it's now full of what I've learned from the students about what really helps them the most.
You're speaking to a fellow educator, first of little people and then teaching teachers. So I understand completely. Our craft, our knowledge, it progresses right along with our students and makes it better than it could have been before. So I can really appreciate that take on it for sure. So I wanted to share just a couple of the pieces of it. Like I said, I have far too many sticky notes to be able to talk about all of them, but a couple of them that jumped out for me was the idea of grocery bags and maypoles. I loved that chapter. I think because I love, especially the maypole, I love character-driven novels. I love where I really feel like that character is now someone I speak about in my actual life as if they are real, right? And I find out so much about them. I never would have realized that the careful structuring of really getting us into all the layers and depth of a character's life had a particular name. And now it makes so much sense,
I made up those names. I made up those names.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is that something you learned? Is that something so how did you make up those names? Because as a reader, both, as someone who writes nonfiction, I write a lot of narrative nonfiction for teachers. I could see the structure piece as a writer, but what I really loved was I sat there and thought about some of the books that I've really connected with those characters. And I thought, oh, that's what they were doing. And now I know I'm going to look for it when I read. But how did that come to be? How did those terms come to be for you?
Well, it's so interesting. If all you do is read finished books, then a lot of the work that makes the stuff that makes it work it flows so well, it's kind of invisible and it's hard to pick out. So it's been such a privilege to work with people on their early work and see something and just wondering, this isn't working. How can I help them make this work better, and trying to figure out what's going on. So it's just been such a privilege to be allowed to see people's unfinished work and help them with it, because I have learned so much. You can learn so much more from reading something that's not working and figuring out why. Well, not necessarily more than you learn from a great piece, but you learn differently. Yeah, sure. And so many high schools, and particularly in the UK with the GCSE curriculum, they teach the value of details, which is wonderful. But what a lot of people take away from the lesson of, hey, more details equals more vivid, is they'll just kind of scattershot a whole lot of details at the reader. And the reader can have a heck of a time trying to wade through all that information, figuring out what they're going to hold on to, because a reader cannot hold on to every word you've written. They turn scenes into images, and they hold on to a few things from each scene, but they can't hold on to individual words. So grocery bagging and maypoles are about ways of grouping details, grouping information, so that instead of feeling like you're putting a dozen cans of green beans and tomatoes into their arms. You're giving them a bag of tinned food, and they can walk away with the bag of tinned food. They can carry all of it. They'll be fine. But if you just give them a bunch of random things without grouping them together, they're not going to know what to prioritize. They're simply not going to be holding on to what you necessarily want them to be holding on to.
So you did some grocery bagging of your own in this book, huh?
I tried.
Figuring out that connection to the nonfiction book. The other piece I really loved, both from thinking about it as a writer, but again, especially as a reader, was the idea of a book needing wonder and worry. And that's what readers come to the page. They need something to wonder about. They need something to worry about, and they want to keep turning the pages to find out what happens. Say more about that, because I think that was a really key one for me, because as a reader, that's exactly right. You're invested, you are wondering, you are worrying. I have no idea how all of you write that so well, but I definitely appreciate the craft behind that as a reader. So I'd love for you to say a little bit more about that.
I think sometimes when you love your characters so much, you don't want anything to go wrong for them.
Yeah.
But a scene and a book, indeed a book, needs something gone wrong, or there's no story. There's got to be something that the character is trying to attain, and they're failing at it. Something is making this difficult. How are they going to overcome this obstacle? Or maybe there's something they want to escape, or something that they need to discover in order to survive. A story needs that, and also individual scenes need that. And it can be different, because if you love your characters, you don't want any of that to happen. But it's important. And something that I learned on the micro scale, because of course this is true on the drone view scale, you need that. But also scene by scene, I have discovered that when I give a writing exercise to a group, and I just, give a place or a, situation or something that's just general. I say, oh, it's snowing, write a scene, or something like that. Or write a scene in first person. The scenes, a lot of them just wouldn't have much going on, and the exercise results wouldn't be very good. And then one day for my first person exercise, instead of just saying write a scene in first person, now that we've discussed it, I said write a scene in which your character receives a present they don't like. And it was the most magical thing, because literally every scene was good. Every single one made you excited, made you want to know more about the characters, made you want to read on. And what I realized was I needed to add inherent tension to my exercises. It's not enough to say it's Christmas morning, your character's opening a present. You have to add that little extra that they don't like, and then the scene comes alive. And while that's helpful for me, a teacher assigning exercises, it's also helpful to every single one of us when we assign ourselves a scene, like, oh, today I'm going to write the scene where she goes to the gas station and she sees on the TV screen the news about her boyfriend or something like that. If you add to that scene, this is the scene where she goes to the gas station, realizes she has forgotten her credit cards, then you're giving yourself an assignment that's going to bring out the best in you.
Yeah. I do love how you did that throughout the book, because, as a reader and someone with a secret desire to write, I'm fascinated by the process of someone who can spend such a long amount of time and investment with characters and figure out, I'm not sure who said that phrase, but it's something like hard writing makes for easy reading. And I'm fascinated. Yeah, I can't remember who said it. I've heard it somewhere. But I just love thinking about, the amount of revisions that I know go into the work, or I talk to authors. One author that I have become close with as a result of this podcast, Terry Brown, she writes historical fiction, and she'll give me an update on how things are going on her book, and she'll say, "Oh, I just rewrote that chapter in a different tense. I rewrote that chapter." I'm like, you what? You rewrote the chapter? It's like, yeah, I'm tinkering with it. I can't decide how it works, which blows my mind that's a thing, and that it's looked at so joyfully. But you do that throughout the pages, where you have these little kind of squares that pop out with actual writing, and it's, well, here's what it could be one way, and here's what it could like this way. And it felt playful, where a lot of my experiences growing up with writing, that revision, that editing, that changing of your mind, that was not playful, right? That was red pen worthy. And it made at least me think differently about what revision and purposeful revision was. And so I really loved the attitude that does relate, I think, to your rest and your daydream kind of philosophy, that you get to do this. You don't have to you get to do this, which reframed it all for me.
There's one of the critique and how to face receiving critique, which is of course part of the revision process. Sometimes it's just you're critiquing yourself, but a lot of times you're getting feedback from other people. And it is hard to hear. I get that. You always give yourself the time to feel maybe sad about it. If people said, this needs to be fixed. When you get your editorial letter from your publisher and you're like, oh, you need me to fix how much? But ultimately, I always tell them, imagine you came into the classroom and I told you, hey, there is a treasure buried here at where we're studying. And here, you can all have some shovels. Go out and try to find it. And I usually teach at this beautiful Tudor mansion called Mattingly Hall. It has extensive grounds. And they would dig all day and maybe they'd find it, or maybe they wouldn't. We don't know. And I said, imagine how different that would be if instead you walked into the room and sitting in the center of the table was a treasure map with an X on it. And I said, actually, there's a treasure buried right there. And then everybody could just go and dig up the treasure and it would be easy. And that's what critique gives you. It puts X's on your treasure map. Because I tell you what, facing a manuscript that is 80 to 90,000 words, it's 300 plus pages, and you're saying to yourself, all right, I'm ready to improve this. How? Where to begin? What to look at? What to care about? It can seem overwhelming. And for somebody to put those X's on the treasure map, to put those X's in the manuscript and say, look, here, 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 and here. And what a gift, because it cuts your work down. Then you're not looking everywhere else. And it can be hard to tell yourself that sometimes, but ultimately critique is a gift.
Well, when you put it like that, it does feel like a gift, right? If you rethink and reframe and think of the criticism, no matter what form or what color or pen or online or whatever, but as reframing of yourself of, okay, this isn't a personal attack on me. This isn't, something that I have to be ashamed of or worried about. This is actually just a sign of a direction that, I can go in. An X on the treasure map. That's something I want to take to my little people, right? Of these are X's to your treasure map. What a beautiful analogy. I love it. I wish I could just hop across the pond and, sit with you and you could teach me like you teach your students.
I wish you could too. You're great to talk to.
So I know the book is primarily, I would say, for people who are trying to write that novel they've always wanted. And I think if we all dig deep, there are so many of us that believe we have a story in us. I think everybody does, but I think there are a lot of us who harbor that kind of back in the secret background. But I also think that this book is for someone who just loves writing and appreciates the written word. And I think it's something that I took away, as I mentioned, as a reader. I've got a better understanding of myself as a reader, what I like, why I like it, why I gravitate towards certain authors, because the style that they're writing in seems to work for me. But I also just felt like it was good advice. There were good lessons. There was good inspiration for someone who might never attempt to publish a novel, but who does just enjoy writing for themselves, whether that's in a journal or a notebook or poetries or short stories or whatever that is. I think that this book is for anyone who just appreciates the writing process and wants to get in a little bit deeper. Do you see a place in your book for both kinds of readers?
Oh, absolutely. That was my hope.
Oh, good.
And I've been so excited that people have been seeing that part of it. And also after I had my launch party, my launch event last week, and I got emails from some of my friends who had attended, and one of them is a historian and one of them is a programmer. And they both said, all that stuff you talked about applies to my field too.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? So this is what I'm hearing. These are life principles about communicating.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm glad it's useful even beyond a narrow focus.
Yeah. There are lots of universal truths kind of threading in here that people could apply to wherever they wanted to apply them. There was one other thing that I would love to bring up, because I mentioned in the beginning, I may be a notebook hoarder. I have I won't say too many. I have a lot of notebooks and journals. I write in them all in different ways across different periods. And so I really loved one of your chapters towards the end. Actually, it is the end, the last chapter, the beauty of the work, and kind of leaning into those things that make you happy, whether it's a space to write, if it's the special notebook, if it's the indulgent pens, if it's some memento of the writing process. Do you have special writing tools or spaces or things that make work like this possible for you? Because I'd love to know your favorites.
Well, so here are the things that I was thinking of. But before I say that, I just want to tell the listeners that I know you can't see Stephanie right now, but I can see Stephanie, and she has shelves of beautiful mementos behind her, which that is exactly the kind of thing that I was thinking of. No, the origin of me thinking of that is because, as I said, I teach at Mattingly Hall, which it's an enormous privilege to teach in a beautiful place. And the students really treasured coming to the beautiful place each week and feeling like it's partly theirs. And there's something, it gives the work a special feeling. And I really miss it because we went on to Zoom for the pandemic, of course, and we were so grateful for it. But then they decided for two of the courses that they would just stay on Zoom forever. It's easier, it's cheaper, and there's a bigger, student pool, which fine. But I thought we would also do the in-person teaching alongside it, and they've canceled it. And so I've really been doing a lot of thinking about place and how I think place can enhance experiences. And so a friend and I we now rent beautiful places in Cambridge City Center to continue teaching. So, and not everybody has that opportunity, right? To have a dedicated study or a beautiful place to learn in. But sometimes all it does take, is a special object to be that same kind of trigger. I don't want anybody to feel like they need a lot of money or they need a lot of privilege to be able to access a beautiful space. It can be your favorite window seat in the library. It can be, a lovely park, or if you don't have that privilege, as you said, a lovely notebook or pen. So a lot of that came from my teaching. For my writing, so I started writing my first novel when our second child was 6 months old. So I got very adept at, I could only write where the baby wouldn't see or hear me.
Yep.
So I don't have a dedicated writing space in our house. I got in, and they're 18 and 22 now. So it's not a problem, but I got into this habit of, I'm this little nomad around the house, but I always have with me, my laptop with all my things, but I have my two beautiful ragdoll cats at my side right now. They follow me everywhere. So I think they, in a way, are my little talismans. We just find a little different space in the house whenever I want to write, and we curl up. I have blankets. My husband often gets me a blanket at Christmas. And so blankets, cats, and my laptop, and I am good to go.
I love that. I love that. You're right. Little things can make a big difference, but you really just need you and a willingness to write in a space that makes you feel comfortable in doing that, which all of us can find somewhere.
Even if it's in your car at lunch break or
Yes.
something.
Yes. Oh my gosh. My second book that I wrote for teachers, I joked in it that I pretty much wrote it exclusively from my car of multiple baseball fields across,
Wow.
New Jersey and Connecticut, because that's what life was like. And if I was going to write, that's where it was going to be. And yeah, the car with a laptop was very effective. So do you have any parting words, I guess, for us? Because your book is full of ideas and lessons and tips and tools and inspiration. But if you could just say one thing to someone who wants to write that book, who's had the idea, who's in the daydreaming of it, and just they need that nudge to just do it. Do you have any wonderful words of advice that you would give to us? And
I do, but I'm going to expand on them slightly.
Good.
Okay. I'm going overtime.
Let's do it.
So I would say you should read whatever you love to read, because you need that inspiration, and that if you want to write, you should. And I just think those two things are so important, because so many people think there are things that they're supposed to read, that they have to read, that if they're going to be a real writer, they need to read books of a certain kind. No, you get to read whatever you're drawn to, and then write books like that. That's, it's not just permission. I'm telling you that that's exactly what you should be doing, not just something you're allowed to do. And then the other thing is about, if you want to write, you should. A lot of people wonder, well, who am I to set out to write a book? Well, you're somebody who is feeling that desire in your heart. That's the sign. That's the signal that you should be exploring that story. I can't guarantee it will end up on the shelves of Barnes and Noble. That's not all books get there, but there is so much value between starting and Barnes and Noble. Just saying things to make them clear for yourself, to saying things and sharing them with the people around you. And there are just ever widening circles of options, almost infinite options between here and Barnes and Noble. So maybe you'll get there, or maybe you'll get to a different circle, but all of it's good, all of it.
Oh, I love that. In our graduate program that I work at, when we are talking about teaching writing, we say often, it's not about the writing, it's about the writer. And you just captured that beautifully. It's not about the finished book on the shelves of Barnes and Noble. It's the process. It's who you became and what you have done and how you feel along the way. And I love that you mentioned there are so many more options of getting your work into readers' hands than that typical book on the bookshelf as well, because then that does just broaden the possibilities for so many people that think, well, okay, well, maybe I could do that. And then it just has this effect from there. I love that. And it all starts with rest and daydream.
Indeed,
I'm
it
going to go
does.
back to that first page that was so powerful for me. I loved that. Oh, thank you so much for chatting with me today about this. You've definitely you've spoken to like the inner parts of my writing heart that is reminding myself that, there's a book in there, and I know so many people are going to feel the same. So where can people find you if they want to know, when they want to know more?
My website is emilywinslow.com. That has all my novels, my memoir, and this book as well. If you're looking for this book, your best bet is Amazon. That is the fastest way to get it, but you can also get it at all the other, book websites, and also you can order it through bookstores if that pleases you. Might take a little longer though.
Well, it's worth the wait. It would be worth the wait if that was
Thank
the route
you.
someone took. It's a beautiful book. It's inspiring. It's writing lessons, it's life lessons, it's so many things. And I'm so grateful that you put it out in the world and then came on today to talk about it with us. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. Plus, if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, bibliotherapy book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking challenges, live events, giveaways, and much, much more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. You can learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks for listening.